welcome in. Today's guest is someone you rarely get to hear from publicly, and that's exactly why this conversation matters. I'm really excited about it. Jon Gibson has built a career across one of the most competitive spaces in medical technology. He started in robotics, and he went on to sell tens of millions of dollars in capital equipment. And today, he serves as the vice president of marketing at a fast-growing orthopedic company. What makes Jon different is how he thinks. He's extremely sharp, deeply prepared, and very clear about what actually takes to succeed in medical sales and in leadership. He speaks with integrity, conviction, and honesty, even when it's uncomfortable. I know that firsthand, which is why I trust him, which is why I call him, which is why I like his perspective, because it carries weight, whether I like it or not. Jon and I worked together early in our careers at Stryker and robotics. We came from completely different backgrounds, learned the capital business together, and challenged each other consistently. He knew how to run the robot. He knew demos. He knew marketing. I knew sales. I knew orthopedics. We very different backgrounds, but together we learned capital selling. That foundation turned us into years of direct conversations, real feedback, and a shared understanding of what separates average performers from truly elite ones. In this episode, Jon breaks down what is expected at high levels of medical sales, why preparation and awareness matters more than most people realize, and how candidates and professionals alike often misunderstand what success actually requires. This is one of those conversations that delivers value whether you're trying to break into medical sales or if you're trying to move up in medical sales or just simply understand how top performers and leaders think. You're about to hear from someone whose insights are rare, direct, and incredibly relevant. I promise you that. So let's get into it. My conversation with Jon Gibson. One thing I should keep in mind when I interview.
Look, I mean, in an interesting parallel, what you're doing now, right? Having kind of left the industry for whatever year and a half to do this is kind of no different than what someone is doing to try to break in the industry, right? If I think about it, right, so you have trauma experience, you have Mako capital experience, but those are in different fields. So, I look at it of, do you have self-awareness? And, I think you saw in my notes that I sent you, like, are you treating each interview like a sales call? And that is generally searching the objections you think you're about to get. One, you haven't been in the business in a while. Why did you leave? Right? Because that's probably every, somewhat talented interviewer, right, is going to ask that question. Why did you leave? Did you lose the drive? Did you, whatever, fail out? I'm not saying that's what you did, but they're going to ask those questions.
Yeah.
And then two is understanding the difference in sales cycle, right? Which you kind of hit on. So I think going in there and saying, here's why I think I'll be successful.
It's true. It's funny, depending on what position you're sitting in the room, how differently you come and approach that kind of meeting.
But you could
Yeah.
also, not to cut you off, but
Oh, you're good.
I think you could have that conversation and say, you went through this transition to this role. What did you do to be, what I'm saying? What did you do to be successful? It's clear that you guys have found success with these types of people transitioning. What did they do? Here's what I
Yeah.
think, but what did they do? Give me feedback on what you want to see, and I'll go do that. And then,
Right.
experiences of how you've been successful doing those things with the proper direction.
Yes. Yes.
Generally what you're looking for is, do I have a dialed in sales process and do I understand the sales process to this industry? You have that, right? Now, granted, you're probably going to need to figure out the clinical validation and different prospecting steps in that. But once you get to a surgeon champion, you know the deal, right? Get them clinically validated, which you have to understand what tools they have. Then there's a surgeon coaching perspective. Then it's getting to the C-suite. And then how do you do that?
Um, I think you brought up a really good point because it's a sales process and challenging the person who's interviewing you. To your point before, it's not not necessarily about what I haven't done in my history, but what I have done. So what I have done for someone who's been in 15 years, well, you've done this a lot. So you probably think this way. You probably expect things to work out this way. But at our organization, we're doing this. So a lot of the entry level candidates that I speak with, they have gaps in their resume. And so we talk about how do we position ourselves to manage those questions of those gaps. But I think that's a really good point, is to also look at, well, you have done this. So they might challenge you by like, hey, this is your experience. And being able to overcome those objections. And the best way is to, but well, in your career, when you did this, or your employees, right? What was it like? How have they done? Like, what was their transition like? And Chris, I interviewed with him for the Mako role. I found out that prior to getting into medical sales, he was a lawyer,
Right.
and he made this odd transition, unusual transition. And he challenged me. He said, "Well, you're a manager right now, right? You're managing sales reps for orthopedic trauma, right? You want to go ahead and sell a robot for joint replacement. It's completely different." And I was like, "Well, you made that jump from a lawyer to medical device." Obviously, I positioned it a little differently, but he got the point, right? I was just generally impressed by the fact that I had done that. It says a lot. I've done the research, the way I positioned the question, etc., and I think that helped me lock in the role.
Yeah, I mean, it's, yeah, I don't know if we've started the interview or not, but I think it is actually important to the conversation, right? So when I look, my end of Mako, right, when I was looking for other stuff, I have a buddy who's in IT related cybersecurity software. He's in finance, but it's I forget the name of the company, but they're one of the big players in it. And he's like, "Look, I can get you in contact with the recruiter, but it's on you from there." And I talked to the recruiter, and she sent me an email. And was like, "Hey, uh, we're looking for people that have cybersecurity backgrounds, right? It's a very complex sales process. You never done this before." And I just said, "Hey, can you call me for 15 minutes? I just want to talk about it." And I remember in the conversation, she was like, "Look, I'm just going to be honest with you. You're not the background we're looking for." And I just said, "Hey, can I just ask you a few questions?" And I was like, "What's your average deal size?" And she was like, "Generally to start, it's 200 to 300 grand, right? But then we're trying to build on that." And I was like, "Well, hey, my average deal size is $1 million." So I was like, "You're looking for someone that can complete a complex, high dollar sales." And I said, "Generally, I'm assuming you want to get to the C-suite." And I was like, "Maybe that's different for my position. It's probably like a CTO, right? Or a chief data officer." She's like, "You're right." And I said, "Well, what I would say is I don't know that yet, right? And what the vernacular is to talk to them. But do I have C-suite selling experience?" The answer is yes, right? My goal was to get a user, which I'm assuming at your level, you're talking to some director of IT or someone of that nature, and you're trying to get to the decision makers. And I was like, "So one, I'm already selling a package that's 4x a typical sale that you have. Two, I have C-suite experience. And three,
Yeah.
it's a complex sales cycle," which I said, with our robot, we're having to go through IT, data, cybersecurity review, and arguably in a tougher industry where you have PHI, HIPAA related things. And I said, I've shown success with those things. Plus, I also said, orthopedic surgery is pretty complex. I'm not saying that data cybersecurity isn't, but I was able to, in that, she just goes, "You know what, you're right. I'm going to put you in contact with the hiring manager." Because she was like, "The way you've articulated that." So it's a lot of the times is I think doing the research up front and understanding what are they going to question about me,
Mm-hmm.
and how do you bring it back to, without looking like you're just bragging, but how do you bring it back to what's important, relevant to them? I mean, and my tip for you would be, what was interesting is when I walked, Kyle and that group through this, I was like, "Look, I've been selling a margin dilutive technology for the last 5 years, right? There's reimbursement, disposables, capital, and service comes out of that. The only way to sell this was return on investment through incremental procedures." I had done the research. They have advanced reimbursement. And I was like, I'm salivating at the opportunity to go to the C-suite and say, "I'm going to give you a cost plus or margin plus ROI,"
Right.
so.
Yes. That's great. Margin dilutive is not a frequent term I've heard. But that makes complete sense. And when I found out about that as well, I was thinking that's something. So it's my understanding from what I've heard that these are not nearly as aggressive as orthopedic surgeons are, or as willing to go to the C-suite and, put their foot down, as we say, and push for the product.
Coaching is gonna
But
become much more important, and
yeah.
I've heard access is easier. Like, they
Yes.
like taking the meetings and all that stuff, so,
Yeah.
uh, but it's the coaching on the back end that you're gonna have to
They're gonna and want to go. They're more open to going to dinners and spending time with you, but that time is going to be spent empowering them. And one
Right.
of them is really, I think, explaining the fact that they'll be getting paid more per procedure, and the procedures will be profitable. And it's a frequently done procedure, so we can articulate the ROI. And I think that'll be a huge part about empowering. Like the C-suite cares about the dollars and cents, the P&L of the organization, and you're saying that you're going to drastically increase that by utilizing this product. They're going to want to talk to you. You're coming to them with a benefit. So
When we were talking about a manual joint replacement, which is, high 90% successful, the clinical delta between those two wasn't as big. Whereas in this space, it seems to be a differentiator.
yeah, Terps, that's right. And I don't even want to. That's really good insight for those who want to understand what is it like to interview on a higher level for people who've been in the industry for over a decade. What do those conversations look like? And they're not that dissimilar. Clearly, we're at a position where they're really looking at the experience and trying to decide. It's never going to be easy for anyone. Um, I would say, I think a lot of people that I work with on entry level are like, well, it's who you know, or I don't have that experience. But I would argue that things don't necessarily ever get easier, and just such as life, things just are different. You're in a different position. So you can sit there wishing the grass was greener. You can wish I had 2 or 3 years of medical experience so I won't be questioned on it. But then you'll be questioned on that experience in the same way that I have 15 years of experience. When I walk into a room to interview to be in a medical sales company, they're going to be questioning my 15 years. I now have to account for 15 years of what I've done, what I haven't done, the reputation I've built, or good or bad, etc. And in fact, if I'm not on point, it's like, well, you should know how to do all these things by now. So for those who are on an entry level place here are looking for that, be careful what you wish for, and you're in the position that you are, and that's it. And just move forward with it. And you don't need a ton of experience to really impress someone. So John, you and I had this, I think, a really good back and forth about what we're going to discuss here today, and I think you have a really good insight, and I really want you to kind of express your experience as to how you got in on an entry level into medical sales, which, if you could give us a little bit of background on where you came from and how you made that decision to get in.
Yeah, happy to get into it. And you said some interesting things that I'll touch on in a minute. But if I state to you how I got into the industry, it is probably not the playbook of how you get in, right? I literally did everything you probably shouldn't do. I cold applied to some striker jobs. And I was fortunate enough that my resume was randomly selected by a recruiter. That goes totally against what you're saying, which is finding it in and finding people and networking and all that stuff. But I would say the world has shifted quite a bit. I mean, when I was applying in, I think it was 2013, LinkedIn was there, but I don't think it is the LinkedIn that people now know and use, right? And it's an extremely powerful networking tool. Um, what I would say is before I cold applied, I did heavy research into the companies I was applying for. Right? I just finished my master's degree in business management. That's one of the things I chose to do. I went to a small Division II school mainly for soccer, right? And I was looking at myself at that degree, and I was like, I don't have Harvard, I don't have U of M, I don't have this name. So I was like, you know what? Everyone's got a bachelor's degree at this point. Let me go get my master's degree. But I just went on and looked up, the top 200 companies in the U.S., started looking at them and said, who do I want to apply for? And I, found Stryker for two reasons. One, it was consistently listed as a top place to work for. Two, highly successful company. And three, I'm from Michigan, so their headquarters were in Kalamazoo, Michigan. I was like, maybe it's a way for me to get back home. Long story short, the job ended up being in Mahwah, New Jersey, so it was totally different than
Yeah.
I anticipated. But so I would say I got lucky that the recruiter picked my email, but I think it's, in any sales process, and I know you're talking to incoming sales reps, is um, the best sales reps don't go in there and they're like, I'm selling a robot today. They're selling to the next step. So first step of the game, are you doing the research on the companies you want? And I would say rather than just cold emailing or reaching out to different companies, do research on the industries you want to be in. Right? I mean, there's orthopedics, there's spine, there's capital, there's different layers of capital, right? Are you selling a power tool that is low budget, 200 grand to 300 grand, or are you selling a disruptive robotic technology at $1 million ASP? Because those are very different capital sales processes. And I think your individual personality and what you're looking for are going to be very different for those different sales roles. Now, I ended up getting a job at Stryker in marketing, and my initial thought was, hey, I'm going to use marketing to get into sales, right? And I found in my first 6 to 12 months, joint replacement sales was not for me. And I respect all those JR sales reps. What they do on a daily basis, inventory management, all that stuff, just didn't translate to what I wanted to do. But it's a long-winded way of saying if I had to do it over again, um, I would have done a ton of prospecting and reaching out through LinkedIn. And like you said earlier, is I think a lot of people look at it and say, well, I don't know someone in the industry, and I'm jealous of that person that has a friend that's in med device and they can get them in. But I call BS on that a little bit, because you have the same opportunity to find those interactions, right? Go on LinkedIn, right? Research the company you're doing. And if your interest is in Stryker, who cares if that person's in the region? Just talk to people and say, I'm thinking about getting into this industry and this company, and say, why did you get into it? What do I need to have to get into it? The first part of it might just be fact finding, due diligence on what you need to be successful. Because they might say, hey, you're going to be on call for 7 days a week. You're going to be working till midnight. Maybe that's not you. So you're prepping and interviewing and applying for roles that don't make sense for what you want to be. What I've learned in this industry is there's two big things, whether it's a sales rep or a surgeon. They love to teach. And at some point, that sales rep that you're talking to, someone gave them their shot. And there's a
Yeah.
lot of people in this industry that want to be the person that found this diamond in the rough that gave someone their shot. And then the next thing you know, 5 years into their career, they're on stage at a sales meeting or whatever that is. So don't underestimate what I would call the networking piece of this, or the people wanting to help other people pursue this career, because at some point they were in your shoes. They were on the
Yeah.
outside looking in. To this day, I remember it. I was interviewing a young lady for a role at Things Surgical. And one of the things that stood out to me in the interview is, I have a mentor, Nick, I think, and every interview he asks this question: how did you prepare for this interview? And it's interesting when you see people, some you can tell like they were just showing up to the interview and hoping to just, say what they were going to say. But this individual said, I called an orthopedic surgeon. And I was like, how'd you,
Yeah.
and she was like, well, I talked to my different family and I got connected different ways. And she actually interviewed an orthopedic surgeon. And that stood out to me because I was like, one, it shows initiative. She knew what she didn't
Yeah.
know, reached out to her network and found a surgeon that was willing to give her 30 minutes to an hour of their time to better educate on why we had a product market fit, what are the complications, what are the benefits of robotic surgery and things like that. So on one hand, it's easy to have that person in your network that you can call and be like, oh, I know Pedro, he's been in the industry, he has this network and connecting with people. But conversely to that, I would take someone that doesn't have that network, that found a way to find individuals and network and work to
Yes.
find that in as a benefit, right? This person didn't have that advantage and they found a way to have that same advantage through their own hard work and preparation.
Yes. That's a really great point. I remember interviewing, and if somebody came to me and they had a connection, the challenge that I would immediately pose them with is, have they gone the extra mile in any way other, than other people who have made the connection through their efforts, right? So do they feel like they're owed something, right? Is this something that is just, I mean, I've even seen candidates come my way that I feel like they weren't even bought in on the opportunity. This was something that was presented to them. And now it's like, well, why not? Stryker's a great company. or medical device is a great position to be in, so let me just take this role. And you will get challenged. And the way that you're challenged isn't necessarily direct questions about it, and it certainly can be. But there are what I call traps. I've decided to call them traps when I speak with my clients. It's like you have no idea that they're, with their questioning and with what they're posing you with, is actually luring you in to open up honestly about something that they are really concerned about, but they don't want to show their concern, right? It's going to come with a smile on their face. It's going to come from behind. They're hitting the flank. And next thing you know, you expose something about yourself that you actually have a backup plan to go into finance. You're also interviewing for some other company. And it's like, see, you don't want to be in medical sales. You're not totally 100% driven. These other candidates are. Great, you have a backup plan. That's fantastic. Thank you for telling me that you have a backup plan that is not medical sales. So that's one really great point. Something else that two other things that you had mentioned, and I'll summarize one. It's going the extra mile. And expressing that you've gone the extra mile is incredibly important in so many ways. And you can get creative in doing that. I would argue that probably the biggest thing that I would look for when hiring someone who hasn't been in sales or medical sales is, in what ways have you gone the extra mile in preparing for this interview, to get this interview, right? And the way you presented yourself in this interview. And that's where I tell my candidates, don't be so modest when you have gone the extra mile in your life to get this interview, to sit with me or watch my program, and then to not put that on your resume and to not say that. Position that, sell that aspect of yourself, to say, look, this is something I'm very serious about, to the point where I'm spending hours of my time getting educated on it, and present those things. Because as an associate, you're not necessarily expected to go sell a robot, $1 million robot like you did to an executive surgeon. It's just someone who's willing to do anything and everything that we say, but obviously mindful of what's actually going on. And lastly, the next step, I'm stealing that. We did learn that. I mean, we spoke about that a lot when we had neighboring territories, is you're selling to the next step. Because I feel like I haven't articulated so concisely when I tell my clients, you want to close at the end of every interview. But that can sound confusing. It's like, hey, I'm going to try and get them to hire you. You're not trying to get them to hire you after every interview. You're trying to close them to make sure that you get to the next step, you get to the next interview, or whatever that next step might be, right? And then we discuss it every time they go on an interview, what that next step is. But I think that's, frankly, it's genius. It's like making sure that next step comes, or coming to an agreement with them as to what the next step is. So, hey, thank you for meeting with me. What is the next step? Might be just the plain old question. Speak directly to it.
Yeah, and I think it's right. I mean, we talked about early on networking. How do you find your foot in the door, right? Which that is hard, right? It's a competitive industry. You got tons of people. But now, once you've gotten to the point where a recruiter has said, you know what, I'm going to put you on to the hiring manager, whoever that is, that then starts the next hardest step, which is, how do you sell yourself that you're the right person, right? And I would say is, look, you have to look at it, when we talk about the sales process, there are different stakeholders that have different needs and wants. Use the recruiter, right? Whether it's internal or an external recruiter, as an ally, right? If I look at the recruiter, what is their job? They want to find someone for this role, fill it, and move on to the next one. They can be an ally for you. Have you asked them what is the process, right?
Yeah.
First, you're meeting with the hiring manager, then you're meeting with someone on the team. Then the final step is X. Maybe you have to do a presentation, but have you asked them to define that process so you know what you're trying to close on for the next step, right?
Yeah.
I look at it from that fashion of, it should be a two-way street in an interview process. And if you're not following up with that recruiter, following up with that hiring manager, and understanding that process throughout, you're going in blind. And to your point, are you selling yourself on something that isn't important to them, right? Have you asked the question, what is important for this sales role? What does this hiring manager want out of it? Because you might be selling them all this experience you have that is not important to that sales manager. Do you know why that role is opening up? Did they lose someone? Why did they lose someone? Are they opening up because their team is growing and they need more scale, right? But then if you look at it from the hiring manager, look, you mentioned it, right? If you're hiring a senior sales rep, what you should be selling at that point is very different than an associate sales representative position. They're coming into it knowing I'm most likely not getting someone with 5 years of sales experience. So they know what the benchmark is. But at the
Yeah.
end of the day, they're looking at you, and this is going to sound very candid and blunt, but your return on investment, right? If
Yeah.
I spend this time to interview
Yeah.
this person, right, I'm going to take 30 minutes out of my busy day. And I can tell you, as now an interviewer for roles, it sounds really crazy to think this, but within the first 5 minutes, if I haven't been intrigued, engaged, whatever, my mindset in terms of you as a candidate is very different, right? I've got 30 minutes to do this. If you can't explain something to me in the first 5 minutes that at least engages me or piques my interest, mentally I may be out, right? So then they're saying, does this person have the ability to learn? Right? Can they learn quickly? Are they a good
Yeah.
team member? Right? Because an associate rep, you're probably running trays, doing inventory for multiple team members. At the end of the day, can I put them in front of a customer? Do I trust that if I take Pedro Adorno at 18 years old, 20 years old, whatever that is, that they will show up professionally, even though I'm not asking them to sell that surgeon? But at some day, I'm thinking I'm going to put them in the OR with one of my relationships, one of my customers. Are they going to carry the brands that I want of my company, of my product, of me, right?
Yeah.
So in that, are you explaining to them why they should invest time in you? Because then we go through the interview process. Now you start day one. The worst thing that can possibly happen for that hiring person in that company is you're not the right fit. Now they spend all this time and money on an interview process. You've now joined their company and they're sitting there saying, oh man, did we make the right mistake? So really it's a return on investment. And they're saying, what is the risk of this individual? Are they going to be here?
Yeah.
And you said that early on, to hit on it, is does this person want a job or do they want a career? Right. And that's
Mm.
what I'm looking for, is if I'm going to spend this time on board this person at Stryker, right? It was a month of virtual training followed by an intensive 1 week in Mawa learning about all the different products. That is time, energy, and effort off the company. And they're wanting to say at the end of this, is this person going to be a value add to the team? Or are we going to be looking back and saying, wish we would have gone a different direction, right?
Those are really no phenomenal points, and these are the consistencies of education that I have to provide to these candidates to help them recognize what is really going on in the mind of a hiring manager. And it's not typically what they think, but I think you really touched on and put it in such a way that it's really understandable from someone who's never been in medical sales, right? Do I feel comfortable putting you in front of a surgeon? Not because I expect you to sell them on anything, but to be a representative of the company, of the local organization, of my local team. And that's what they're looking for. Can I proudly walk into an office that I've been building relationships at for years? I've worked really hard to get these people to trust me with their business. And it's not just the doctor or just the executive. It's the nurse, the person at the front desk, every single person that works here who knows me now by my first name and greets me every single time. And I'm now going to say, Ryan, Angela, whoever, so-and-so, this is someone that's a part of my organization now. This is an extension of me. So now you have to, that's essentially the job, having them feel comfortable enough to say, I'm a representative of your organization. That's different than the hiring manager, the HR/recruiter interview, where you're speaking with a talent acquisition person. It's like, are you going to be a good representative of the organization? Do you understand what we're doing here on a general sense? Can you articulate well? And do I think that you'll blend with the local culture? Because I don't work with the local team or like in their branch, but I communicate with them at least weekly. I know what they're looking for. I know those types of guys and girls and what they like. Will you blend with them? So that's where your research needs to come in terms of trying to speak with people at the organization to get a sense of that culture, that vibe, right? For example, Stryker, and that's where we worked. They tend to have a lot of athletes or ex-military, right? A
Let's
strong
break it
percentage.
down though, right? Because that is a thing in the industry, right? Stryker is known for hiring athletes, and I would
Yeah.
say probably across med device in general, there's a lot of athletes. It's not about that they want athletes, right? It's about what athletes bring, right? So if you did athletics
Yes.
at a collegiate level, what does that say? I was dedicated to a cause, right? I practiced, I whatever, did weights outside of the practices. I got to a high level. I was then able to balance academic and athletics in a multifactorial complex situation of college, right? Where you have a social life,
Yes.
academics, athletics. Were you able to balance all of those things? And if you were able to then do it at a high level, what that shows is dedication, hard work, and ability to be proficient or an expert or whatever you want to call it at that
Hmm.
level, right? So it's not so much about the athlete, it's what does the athlete bring, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and that's what I would say is, you look at it. So I go to, it's interesting. I was watching a movie on the plane this week. It was 21, right? The movie about the MIT grad that does card counting.
Yeah.
What does card counting have to do with this story? I don't know. But
Good
at
movie.
the beginning of the movie, it starts with the interviewer basically saying, "Hey, you got a 4.0 GPA from MIT. You were head of this club, that club, yada, yada, yada." He goes, uh, "We've narrowed it down to 76 applicants, and all of your resumes basically look exactly like this. What do you have to tell me that dazzles, pulls you off the page?" Right? And I think that parallel to med devices, highly
Love that.
competitive industry. They've got hundreds, if not thousands, of applicants for this individual role of people in your situation that are probably have a high GPA, have high athletics, all those things. So what are you going to express to the recruiter, HR individual, the hiring manager in the first 5 minutes over that interview process that they're saying, this is why I want to hire Pedro over these other hundreds of applicants, right? And so, it goes back to my luck of getting interviewed. But one, I will tell you, it comes down to preparation when you get that interview, right? I've seen multiple people. I get it. We're in a more casual atmosphere since COVID. But if you show up in an interview with me in a t-shirt, on a virtual meeting, I'm sitting here saying, do you want this job? I'm putting you in front of a surgeon. If you can't put on at least a business shirt, sport coat, suit and tie is best. I mean, the old adage, dress for the job you want, not what you have. But then two is the two questions I always start with an interview are why Think Surgical or why my company and why this role? And if you can't tell me with good reasoning of why. And this goes back to I'm not asking you to say, I read the surgical technique and I watched these videos, but in that opportunity, I'm giving you the forum to brag, right? I talked to an orthopedic surgeon. I talked to this person. I went online, I watched your videos, and here's the market fit I see, right? At X company, your product is differentiated compared to your competitors, and here's why I want to be a part of that. And then if you can't tell me why you want to be a part of the company, but then subsequently why you want this role. Now, I get it. You may be interviewing with this company or that company. Maybe you do want to get into marketing or finance, but if you can't articulate to me what the value is and why you're driven to this company, I'm sitting here saying, do you actually want this role? Do you want to be a part of this company? Right. Uh,
Yeah.
and I
That
looked at a very, very small, but like I remember one of the interviews I had at Stryker getting in, which by the way, that is a gauntlet. There's like phone interviews, and I don't know if it's
Yeah, it
changed.
is.
Then I went on site 2 separate times where I had 8 in-person interviews and all this stuff. And I remember one of the product managers asked me, he said, how many knee replacements, hip and knee replacements do you think are done in the US per year? And I stated literally like to the number because I had looked that number up.
Hell
And
yeah.
and you could tell that shocked the person, but then it was like, I'm gonna trap this guy. I'm gonna go deeper. And it was, well, okay, how do you know that number? And at the time I probably said wrong. I just said I Googled it, right? Which was not the right term to go against an interview. I was basically saying like, well, why wouldn't I know that? But then he was like, how many hip and knee replacements do you think are done per day in a hospital? And that's something you can't Google, right? But what the question was asking, can I critically think, right?
Yeah.
At that point. And I said, look, I don't have a calculator in front of me, but there's 7 days a week. They probably don't operate on Saturday and Sunday. So I take that number, minus, the 5 days per week that they're actually operating. They're
Love
probably
that.
not doing them every day. But at that point, to your point is there's research you can get online, which I would say everyone has that capability, right? Chat GPT, Google, all that stuff. That is the baseline. You better know what industry you're getting into. You better know what products and procedures. But then
Yeah.
from there, at this role, they're saying, if I put this person in this role, at some point there is going to be something outside of what you've been trained today. Can you critically think through that problem and solution right on the spot? Because no matter how much training you get, no matter how many orthopedic procedures, how many spine procedures you've been, something is going to occur that you've never seen before. Can
Yeah.
this person critically think through?
That 100%. There's you bring up some interesting points, and there's all sorts of questions that you're going to be given. All depends on the person that you're speaking to. And I want to bring up something that I haven't brought up before. I'm recognizing it with a few candidates that I have right now, where some of the interviews that they're having are not as difficult as they thought they were, and it's because they're for these smaller organizations, let's just say 1099 positions with someone who's starting a distributorship. For those who don't know what that means, it's essentially a mom and pop shop, like the most basic version of being able to sell medical sales. And it's throwing them for a loop as to like they're coming in super prepared. They're impressing the crap out of these people and they want them right away. And it's like where was the hard part? It's like, one, you prepared extremely well and you don't recognize how different you are than you
Right.
were 2 months ago, right? But at the same time, this isn't a top company. This is not um, a publicly traded organization that you're trying to join that has a gauntlet of people that you meet with and all sorts of questions because they're having so many people interview with them. They're having a difficult time finding a decent candidate because they don't have a recruiting service and all these things. So there are certain watchouts, which leads to the greater thing in life. 2 points. One is the harder something is to obtain, the greater the reward there is, right? So if you see it as being extremely difficult, it's supposed to be difficult because the reward is there. Hiring managers at these legitimate companies, and not to discredit the small distributorships, but what people are looking for, like with the really good pay, the really good benefits, the really great opportunity, a large organization with a lot of support for you to be successful. In order to get that, you're going to have to go through the gauntlet. And these hiring managers are put in a place where they have to get really good at asking difficult questions to figure out who you are because they're getting so many resumes and they're dealing with so much turnover. The amount of people that come and go, whether it's they have to let them go or these people just kind of flunk out on their own. And I notice that's what happens is because they haven't asked the right questions and they haven't discovered well enough, right? A bad an interviewer who can't interview well is going to have a really, really good time building a successful team over the long haul. And I've seen that because, some people who go to 4-year colleges and prepare for an interview and know what to say, they're going to look great. And then 6 months in, they're like, I don't want to do this. It's freaking 9 o'clock at night for the ninth weekend in a row. I'm fielding calls. It's like, this is not what I signed up for. So, with everything that you're saying, it's reminding me of the different types of interviews that are occurring out there, and you can judge a company by their interview process. And the more difficult it is, probably the more legitimate the job, which should get you excited. And you should be noticing whether or not you're the type of person who rises to the challenge,
Well,
right?
and I think you bring up a point is I go back to the two-way street, right? Or I get it, right? You're fresh out of college, or maybe you're making a career transition. You've decided med device is for you. Are you asking the right questions to fully understand the role and the culture and the organization you're getting into? Which I'm not telling anyone to walk away from a job or an entrance into the community or the industry, but you also don't want to go into a role, right? And it's not the right fit for you, right? It's not going to give you the education you want, because then if it's not a fit, now you're in the situation where you're at a company having to work, maybe you're not engaged, and then now you might have a blemish, I might call it, or a question on your resume. You went to X, Y, and Z company. You're there 6 months. Why are you interviewing now?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
back to the conversation we were having earlier, it's, look, people are going to pick up on that. If they're adept interviewers, they're going to say, why did you, now they're saying, do you have loyalty to this company? And look, you can never, predict the future, right? Maybe it wasn't the right fit, all these things, but you're going to have to answer that question in your
Yeah.
next round of interviews, right? And I was very fortunate. Again, I go back to, I was lucky. Stryker, tons of resources, taught me how to learn the orthopedic industry, how to speak to surgeons, what the level of professionalism you need. I'm now in a startup company where it's, if you want a rigid job description and you only handle this, that's not Stryker, right? This is
Hmm.
different, right? Wearing multiple hats. Someone's going to ask a question, who can do this? And maybe you don't have experience, you're going to have to learn it. So I think understanding what you're getting into and what that job is going to potentially add to you and your experience and what it isn't, right? Because trauma is very different than orthopedics, right? And if you're hey, I want a 9 to 5 job, right? Which I'm not saying is a bad thing. Everyone's different. That is probably not this industry. And
Yeah.
we're not, no matter how hard you work, no matter how hard you try, if that is not you as an individual, you're setting yourself up and the company up for failure because it's just not the right fit. So are you asking the right questions in the interview to, one, help you succeed in the interviews, but two, understand, is this going to be the right fit for me as an individual?
Yes. A quick heads up. If you're getting value from this and you want more, check out medsalesblueprint.com. That's my website where I help people get into medical sales. I have tons of resources and tons of content. So whether you want to get in or you want to help someone get in, send them my way. I'm ready to help. You can reach out to me there, or you can also find me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Back to the video. So your approach into medical sales was a little bit different. You got in through marketing. Yes. You started with marketing, which is interesting because I tell people that there's alternate paths into medical sales. And that might be the best way for a lot of people, because what you don't want to do, my biggest concern is I want to set my clients up for success and not for failure. If you find yourself jumping right into a sales role and you've never been in the industry before, you're likely setting yourself up for failure. I mean, you and I, who were not entry level, were a part of an organization that forced itself to create an associate role because so many experienced sales reps were not finding success when they jumped over into the capital sales of joint replacement robotics, surgical robotics. So even though the organization was hiring highly qualified salespeople in medical sales, they needed to create an associate role because throwing them straight in to go hit quota with this was so difficult. So for these entry level people, finding something that doesn't force you to have to find sales success but still be in the industry is really important. And I would love for you to speak on that, because you started in marketing.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I think I shared with you, I was just trying to get in, right? I mean, take the cold applying approach, right? Which again, lucky to do. But I said, okay, the role's marketing. I want to get into sales. I said, is this a way for me to get a job and get education and experience in the industry? And I said, yes. Plus my marketing, I had a marketing degree, so it wasn't, too far from what I was trying to do at one point. And what I found is, one, I never thought I would be in the medical field. Like when you talk about my classes to begin, my dad is in pharmaceuticals. I always joked, I was like, I'm never going to be in science and medicine like you. And then when I took this job, he kind of laughed. He was like, oh, really? But I found out I loved it. Right. You talk about being in an industry, you and I could go sell a widget, consumer-based product, right? Whatever. The average person is not that educated. You're in this industry, you're talking about selling to individuals that have gone through undergraduate, 5 years of med school, 5 years of residency, potentially fellowship training. You're selling to highly educated individuals that understand their industry, right? They've seen a ton of people come to them beforehand. But at the end of the day, they're looking at, how does this product benefit my practice and my patient? Right? There's an altruistic nature to like what we're doing, right? It is a business, but you should be passionate about patient care, because at the end of the day, no matter what you sell, whatever you're doing in this industry, at the end of the day, it touches a patient's life. And either you're making that life better and changing their paradigm in life and knee replacements, right? They're walking, right? They have pain, all those things, or your product is going to negatively impact their life, right? And I hate to say that, but that's a part of this industry. Well, I
Yeah.
took it, I started on hip approach education, which is around soft tissue envelopes and stuff on the hip replacement. I was very fortunate at that time. Coincidentally, Stryker just acquired Mako, which was, I would say, at the beginning was a very confrontational or contentious acquisition by the company. Why do we need robotics and so forth? And I was young
Sure.
and naive, and I was like, how do I get into this, right? Robotics makes a ton of sense in terms of precision in this industry and everything. And I was fortunate enough that, back to the person who gives you a shot, Lauren that Stryker was my hiring manager, and she and I were on the Mako hip marketing team, learned a ton about robotics, and that kind of operated as a startup within inside of a large corporate organization, right? Funding and so forth. And,
Yeah.
fortunate enough, Lauren went on maternity leave and I reported to Mike when the Mako Total Knee launch was coming up. And I was like, how do I get onto this program? Right. I mean, it's going to be one of the most influential, high profile products within the organization. And again, I would say probably part luck, right? That I got into hip marketing and had those individuals that were attached to that. Part of it, I would say though, is look, hard work brings you luck. And I would like to say that I prepared and showed the organization I was willing to take that on. And so I was the
Yeah.
product manager for Mako Total Knee. And I'll get into how I got into sales, but I think a lot of people think, okay, I got to break in, but then what do you do with that opportunity once you're there? And I had to look myself in the mirror during Mako Total Knee. I was like, one, I knew nothing about knees. So I had to go learn knee replacement surgery, which I got into as many ORs as possible, learn the surgical techniques, talk to every rep I could so I understand knee replacement surgery. And I'll be honest, within 3 months, I was looked at as an expert not only in knees, but robotic knees. And at that time, no one was doing robotics. So we got to this launch of Mega Total Knee. Who's going to train the first few surgeons? It was me and 5 other individuals that were now certifying surgeons. And which
Wow.
is crazy. I'm sitting across from these high profile surgeons in the industry that have instruments named after them. And they're looking at me in a cadaver lab. How do I do this? Right. And I
How'd
say
I
that
get here?
yeah, right. How did I get here? Which is, looking back is crazy, but what a great experience. And
Yeah.
in that launch, right, I dedicated myself. I was like, I'm going to be known as the product expert, right? And I wasn't going into this now. As I got integrated, right, I was a part of some of these capital deal rips, right? And I saw myself and these individuals, right, talking to the C-suite, talking about in-depth financial models and return on investment. I was like, you know what? That's the type of sales I want to do, right? And so any opportunity I could, picking the brain of those capital sales reps, being a part of those meetings, helping them in customer demos and all that stuff, which is the grunt work. But I didn't plan it this way. But what I found is I treated every experience, whether I was talking to a JR rep, whether I was talking to someone in leadership at Stryker, whether I was doing a lab or a demo, I said, I'm going to put forth my best effort in every situation I'm in. I treated it like an interview, right? I'm sitting across this sales rep has trusted in me to be the person to talk to their surgeon, to demo their surgeon. And that is a critical step. Either that demo or
Yes.
conversation is going to move the deal forward or it's not. Right. And I will tell you, there are people, right. And I was fortunate. I worked hard, but I became this go-to person for the capital sales team where they were calling me. I was in 2 to 3 cities a week for like 4 months of the Mako Total Knee launch, maybe even 6.
Wow.
Right. But that was because I earned that trust and earned that seat at the table to where they wanted me there. Now, fast forward,
That's
that's
huge.
when those opportunities came up. I had, 2 mentors in the space, Rick and Matt, who were sales directors of large regions, and they both had territories open. And they kind of tapped me on the shoulder, right? And I would say, yes, some luck, but I earned that. But going back to it, that was a role at the time where they were asking for 5 to 10 years of sales experience or capital knowledge experience. And what I would say is I did not have that experience. But because of how I presented myself, how I showed up for their customers, how I didn't know at the time I was doing sales, but I was part of that sales process.
Yeah.
I had shown to them that, back to the point of risk, they said, okay, this person knows the product better than anyone potentially, right? That's a broad statement, but I was a product expert. So I could talk to surgeons at a different level than most of their reps. So that was an advantage. I knew the
Yes.
organization and I had a good reputation. What I didn't know was, which was a long look in the mirror when it took me, 12 to 15 months to sell my first robot, was I didn't know the sales process. I didn't know when to push in the deal versus when to back off, right? And I probably walked away from some deals because I pushed too hard. I saw these great sales representatives pushing at a deal rip, and I thought I'm going to be like them. And
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
reality is they knew when to push and when not to push, and I was seeing them talk about it, and I was like, oh, I need to push and do this. Whereas if you don't have the ingredients of the deal lined up, you're pushing on a rope right at that point.
Yeah.
So I would say is, if you go into it with your first opportunity and you take advantage of every single opportunity you get, right? Because you never know who's watching, right? And I would say in every interaction with either a surgeon or a sales rep, if you're in marketing, maybe you're in operations, right? There's this great story of this JR rep who's well known in Oklahoma, who he was just doing operations for the branch. And they had an open sales territory, and he talked to the manager, and his pitch was, I know your surgical technique better than any one of your reps. He had memorized the surgical technique for that knee implant, right? And in just natural dialogue, that branch manager or GM said, why wouldn't I give this person the shot? Right. But I look at it as whatever role you get into the industry, take full advantage of that. Right.
Yeah.
Consequently, the other thing too is I would say is find your crew, your mentors, right, in this industry of, what's the old adage of, show me who you eat dinner with and I'll show you what your future looks like. Are you spending time with the top reps in that branch or agency when you're an associate? Are you getting into the OR with surgeons? Are you learning from the best of the best? Because if you're hanging out with people that are, complaining about commissions or their job or whatever, you're going to take on that mentality just through like osmosis. So are you spending time with the people that are going to accelerate your career? Um,
Yes.
and I look back on it of, I did sales, right? But then my opportunity at Think Surgical was, Stuart and Chris reached out to me. And these are people I haven't talked to in probably 5 to 7 years. But somehow I left an impression on them that when they had a role open, I was top of mind. Right. So I think it
That's
plays
huge.
into, how do you get into sales if you don't start there, right? It's how do you get into the rooms and the conversations that get you that education and then an exposure to people, which is good and bad. Because the opposite could be, I could have fumbled those opportunities, not been prepared, and then they would be like, I don't want this guy in my OR or this conversation ever again, and that's a career limiter. But when you
Yeah.
get those opportunities, are you proving to people that you're professional, you're hardworking, it's someone I want to work with? And then I would say, doors open for you or opportunities become available to you based on what you've done on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. It's funny hearing you say all that. I mean, it really resonates. It's on point. But that's where we met. That's where our paths collided, intertwined. I was now here in the Southeast, learning something new. I came over with about 8 years of medical sales experience, maybe 9, and I was thinking I'm going to be great at this. I just came from learning from so many great people. I've done so many great things. I know how to sell. I'm now excited, and I got hit in the face with understanding that capital sales is totally different. There's so many different ways to sell and all different types of selling. And this was brand new to me. You had the Carolinas, and I spent a lot of time with you and watching you, learning what I didn't know about the robot. And I think you leaned on the demos a lot because you were so good at them. Like that was your superpower. You could rely on that. Like that, you knew this is where I shine, right? And seeing you make those decisions as to like, I think I should push. I think I should pull. And you and I having discussions like, what do you think? What's your feedback? Like you worked in a whole branch full of JR guys, right? Like with these surgeons. What's your feel on this person? And it's really, like you said, getting a feel for it, knowing when to push, knowing when to pull. In fact, in so many ways, that's a differentiator between great reps and those who aren't, right? Those who are not willing to push or push them away is huge. But yeah, really, really great insights to hear like what that was all about. I want to ask about fulfillment on your end. When you were in marketing, before you were even in sales, did you get a sense of fulfillment even though you weren't in front of the patient? When did you get this sense of fulfillment? Is it when you got a pat on the back? Is it when you were done after a really long demo and you're packing up and you're like, that went really well? Did you not feel any fulfillment? When did you get that? How did you handle like, hey, what am I doing all this hard work for?
Man, that's a tough question to answer, and the reason I say that is, I'm the type of person that, success is, it's the only option, if that makes sense. So, like, to me, if I'm not successful, I'm unhappy. But then to me, and this is something I've had to figure out in my life, but I'm always like, what's the next step? What's my next step in the career? Yada yada yada. And I would tell you, I'm probably someone who maybe did it the wrong way, but I was always looking around the corner, right, of like what's next. And if you're always so focused on the future and the next step, are you actually enjoying the moment? And that's what I
Yeah.
would say is, I'll come back to your question in a second, but to someone joining the industry, right? Enjoy it, right? And if you're always focused on the next step, that's going to come through to your manager, or the people you're trying to get jobs with. Of are they here in the moment? Or are they only focused on getting to the next level? And generally, the times when you think you're ready for something, you got managers saying, "Hey, you're not," and you're like, "Well, I don't agree with that person," but maybe they're saying it for a reason because there's things you don't understand, that going from an associate to a full line rep, or going from a JR rep to a capital rep, or capital rep to JR rep, that you don't actually understand until you're in it, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that's what I would say is, from a marketing side, the fulfillment was, man, I loved customer conversations. Like the fact that you could start with a surgeon. I'll never forget it. We were doing the Mako Total Knee launch, and I had this surgeon who was using navigation, and he looked at me before the case day and he goes, "Hey, look, Jon, we're going to do this robotic stuff. I don't see the value in it." Uh, and I subsequently had 3 very difficult cases that day, which at the time I was like, "Why are you doing these cases on your first ones? Like, let's cherry pick." And
Yeah.
at the
What?
end of the day, right? Like I was like, "Hey, like we're just launching this thing, we're learning." But at the end of the day, those cases came out so well. He looked at me at the end of the case day and said, "I will never do a non-robotic total knee again." And so
Yeah.
to me was fulfillment. Now I got no
That's the
compensation
moment.
for that or whatever, but to the grand scheme of things, being in marketing, a happy customer, utilization, and everything does help, right? So
Yeah.
those were, to me, the fulfillment was one, uh, very proud of what Make a Totally has done. And I was one small piece of a large organization that did that. But if you look at the market impact on it, you look now, every big 4 company has robots in a time when people said, do you need a robot to do surgery? So looking back, massive career fulfillment. But to me, it was those individual conversations, right? Taking a surgeon who generally, if they're the highest naysayer to what you're doing, and if you can change them into an interested party, huge
Yeah.
fulfillment, right, in terms of that. Then I went into sales, right? And it was different, right? When I was in marketing, I cared, but I didn't necessarily care if AE in the Northeast lost this deal because we knew we had 10 other deals following it, right? Now you're an AE, your life revolves around, mine was North and South Carolina. And I cared about every deal, whether we won or lost it, because that was the difference between hitting my number.
Mm.
Look, the first deals were great, but I somewhat lost that fulfillment because then it was like, I need to go get 6 more, or I need to go get 7 more, right? And it was like, okay, got the deal signed, on to the next one. And so I would say I love my time in capital sales, would probably try to go back and do that at some point in my career. But going back to think surgical now, being in marketing, really leading up our upstream development, what our product looks like, you may get a little bit more sense of fulfillment, right? In that nature. And that just
Yeah.
depends. Are you driving at a paycheck and commission, right? Which is a different sense of fulfillment, which maybe that's not overall my personality, versus are you driving a business and are you making a company succeed? And I think that's what you have to look at. But I would say both experiences were generally pleasing and fulfilling, just in different ways.
Yeah. No, that's a really great answer. I couldn't help but be curious because I mean I learned so much from you, and it was in a lot of ways a blessing being next to your territory, being able to fly out, you inviting me to so many of the demos so that I could learn. I know that you needed a hand with these demos. You could have picked anyone, you could have done it yourself. But I'm grateful that you brought me in. I was picking your brain as much as I could, and I sometimes wonder what is it that makes people tick, and where is the fulfillment sometimes when we're not in the surgery watching that happen. But sometimes that's not the reason people do it. Um, Overall, we want to make sure that we're serving and providing. I think that's generally something that all of us medical sales reps want to do, or people that are in medical sales. And but for me, you know, I had a moment where I was trying to figure out what is it about me that gets me fulfilled in this industry? What gets me excited? What makes me feel satisfied? Hey, where I go to bed at night and I'm like, I'm glad I'm doing this. And I was recently asked about that, and I really didn't have a good answer. It was just like, when I get the contract signed, there's just a moment. It's not necessarily when the money hits my bank account and I got that paycheck. It's not necessarily when the surgery's over. But it's really like I've done all of this and I've overcome so much. There's objections. Like no surgeon is just like, yes, give me your stuff, give me this product. And you made all these calls and it all comes to an end where somebody finally signs off and says, yes, we're 100% willing to commit to you. For me, that's where I get my fulfillment, and everyone's different. I was once educated on when I was starting to manage, it's like you have to recognize that every single one of these people that you're managing are fulfilled in a different way. Some of them are straight compensation, and I bet you know those guys well, right? It's very obvious for those who just here for the pay and they want to get paid the most. Some of them, you're going to have to make a sheet, like a top 10 sales list, like who are the top 10 sales reps? And they look at that and that burns their ass that they are not number one. And suddenly you'll see it. And then others love to go to the national sales meeting, where at Stryker, they take pride in the fact that they have an extravagant national sales meeting that they spend all this money on. But they know that a lot of their people really get that fulfillment and like that pat on the back. Hey, we are so grateful for everything that you've done in the last year, right? Enjoy. This is for you. Get up on stage, be recognized. Well done. And there's all different ways that people can find their fulfillment. And in my humble opinion, I think medical sales really hits on so many levels because so many different things need to get done that you can find multiple places in medical sales where you'll have that fulfillment. Because I don't care if you're getting paid, if you're not doing something that you're feeling fulfilled, there is going to be a gap inside of you that is not getting filled, and it's hard to live with that. Anyways, off my soapbox.
Yeah, but I think, look, you talk about NSMs and so forth, but I think a lot of people think of it just as a recognition piece, but a lot of those companies are using it as motivation and education of what the company is going to be successful at the following year, right?
Yeah.
There is a component of recognition, but I think we oftentimes overlook what the genesis of that, and they're trying to get their sales team motivated on the strategies that will help them be successful the next year. But also I look at, you brought up a good point, is, it went from in marketing, right, which you're working with different parties and different organizations and divisions to be successful towards what you think is a common goal or KPI. To then I went to a sales rep that I really should only have cared about my individual territory. I'm a N of one lone individual. You still have to work with people and everything. But really, at the end of the day, what are you measured on? And that's, did you hit your quota, whether revenue or system based, right? And that's somewhat lonely, but it's a very numbers objective based thing. You could be the most likable person in the industry. You could be having the best conversation, all these things. But at the end of the day, if it doesn't total up to that math equation that they have, right, that's what they're fooling you as. And that was individual contributor. Then, I went to Think Surgical, director of product management, was thankful to then become VP of marketing, but that was hard to release, right? I went from being an individual contributor at the sales level and then product manager, where I was doing all of the work, right? That's what I was measured on. Are you doing the work and were you successful at the work? Then if you
Mm,
become, in the position where you're managing people because the organization thinks you can do that, you're now measured on, are those individuals successful? Are you developing them? Are you making them better? Right. And it comes back to what you said is I have people on my team now that are motivated in very different ways. What they care about versus what I care about doesn't really matter. It's ultimately what do they care about and how do I put them into positions to succeed. But now I'm at a point where, man, I love getting the demos. I love being in customer interactions, but maybe that's not a part of my job anymore. Right. That is on me to
right.
educate and train my team to do that. And it's hard, right? When you're used to being the guy or the girl, and now you're in this position where it's like, actually, my success and how my team does is based on have I empowered and engaged my team to be the guy or
Yeah.
right. And that's a mindset shift. And I still probably struggle with that with this day. I'd still sign up to do demos because it's just, I love that aspect. But I need to take a look back and say, am I taking away an opportunity from someone on my team to have that?
Right. Right.
To have that experience. And that blends, that's harder to do in the startup world, right? Where it's like, hey, are you available to get on a plane and do this? Because X, Y, and Z person can't because of other conflicts and everything. So in the startup world, it's hard to blend that, but that's something you also have to understand is are you mentally shifting in what your role is and what the organization is expecting of you versus what you were doing 2 years ago?
Yeah. Yeah. Just because you were comfortable in it, that doesn't mean that you should continue to do it if you want to see yourself grow. And some people are satisfied and they'll stay in the same position for years. But that's their own journey that they choose. But I think your immediate response to what I said does show how much of a leader you are, or the mindset that you have that you either developed or and cultivated, or you just always had. Where I'm like, national sales meeting, give people recognition. You're like, it's also an opportunity for leadership to drive a message to everyone in the organization and say, great job last year, pat on the back. Next year, total shoulder, our new ankle sets. We need to hit this. Last year we grew this much. Here's the expectation. Whatever the messaging is, this is an opportunity to drive a message to our team so they can go home and know as a whole what this organization needs to be doing. Right. And I think that says a lot. So yeah, I guess you do have to let go of some of those things, and maybe biting your tongue when you're watching someone else give the demo and you're like, man, I would have said that, or are they recognizing this? But yeah, and so how has that been for you now that you're, I mean, on such a level with this company that's well known, carving its space out in the field. I watch it, and whether it's LinkedIn or hearing about it, your organization is unique. How has that been to be more in a leadership role? And as we discussed before, I want to hear what it's like to go from large Striker and organizations like that to a much smaller, more nimble company.
Yeah, look, I think it's if I look back on my career, it played out perfectly in terms of the role I'm in today, and that was I wouldn't say by design. I just at different points when opportunities arrived, I just evaluated them and said, "Is this right for me in my career at the time?" And I look back, and I often said, "Should I have started at a startup where you learn different parts of the business and you're not just focused in singular product management of a product right at a big organization?" And I really respect my time at Stryker. I go back to the training they gave me, 4 months of virtual, then in place, becoming a product expert, how to talk to surgeons, how to talk in the industry, how to understand the industry. And that was immensely helpful for where I'm at now in a startup where you don't have that same education. You start day one as a hiring manager. I'm creating an onboarding plan for you that day, right? We don't have a structured, you start, right? A month into it, you enter JR 101 or whatever this is, right? It's all really on the job training. It's all on the manager or person to help make this person successful. But I say that of my experience at Stryker helped me, I think, be successful here because it gave me structure. I knew what high performing organizations look like and what you had to do. Now it comes with two things, right? One is Stryker large organization, the levels that you have to go through to make a strategic decision, a lot, right? A lot of people have to be on board and so forth. And what I'll tell you is, and I back to your point about setting expectations in the interview process, when I'm hiring and I'm interviewing someone from a large organization, I generally set the expectation of, if you like to be in a large company like that, that is great, right? But with that comes larger decision-making timelines. But at the end of the day, when you make that decision, there's so many people involved that the magnifying glass is reduced, right? They're never going to be like, oh my God, just Pedro made this decision, because there's so many layers that go into making that decision. So at the end of the day, is it all on Pedro as this product manager because he made that decision? Probably not, because there's so many people that signed off on it. Go to Think Surgical, very flat organization. If you have an idea, you can call the C-suite, your manager, say, I have this idea. 2 to 3 weeks, depending on the complexity, we can say yes or no, right? So speed and nimbleness is there. But at the end of the day, they know Jon came up with this idea, and there's a magnifying glass now, right? It is not one of 40 people on a team. It is one of, 130 people in the whole organization. But what I miss of Stryker, right? Resources, right? You have tons of resources, dollars, things like that to invest. Think we have to be very pragmatic about what we invest our time, energy, and effort into. I think it's very different. It's not for everyone. I think my time at Stryker has set me up for success here, but also learnings. And I think, back to your point of fulfillment, if I walk into this role now and I'm expecting the same level of success as I was at Stryker, which is X number of robots per quarter, X number of procedures,
Yeah.
what we're doing, building a business, I am never going to be fulfilled, because I'm looking at they're here and we're here, right? So I think your mindset needs to change, and you need to celebrate the small wins more often here, because if you don't, you're going to feel like you're not doing anything in this business, right? And so I would just say
Yeah.
the highs are higher because you feel like you're intimately involved in every situation. The lows are also lower because every deal we lose or gets delayed, right, that impacts us on a different level than it is at not take Stryker out of a big four strategic, whether that's Intuitive, Procept, all these things that have market success. You have to change your mindset.
That's so true. I can speak to that. I'm thinking about my own career. At the very beginning, I didn't even know when to celebrate my wins, right? I didn't know when was the time. I think maybe it's the way I grew up and trying to be introspective or all these things. It's like we're just driving so hard. And I know that you drive incredibly hard. You're someone who takes preparing very seriously. You expect people around you to prepare because you prepare very well, even for something like this, us getting together, because for whatever reason, it's in your nature, or you developed it, whichever it is. But when it comes down to it, it's like, I've done all this. Now I just need to take a moment to myself and pat myself on the back. And what does that look like? Right? For everyone, it's different. And I think to what you're saying is, no matter you're a part of a large company or a small organization, it's knowing what motivates you and what fulfills you, and when to pat yourself in the back for knowing that you've done a good job, right? Your organization will do what it needs to do to help recognize you, whether that's financially, pat on the back, or just, but it's really on you as an individual to know where and when you can find yourself saying, hey, I've done a good job here. Because everyone around you is driving to be successful, driving to make a lot of money, driving to help the organization. Even the surgeons and the doctors and the nurses, they have their set of goals. But don't forget to pat yourself on the back. And to see at the VP of marketing at Think Surgical, a name well known in the orthopedic space, I'm really happy for you. This has been great so far.
What would be a topic that would be impactful for your viewers and the people that you're catering to?
Here's my experience. Some of my best clients are the ones that have come to me who have already submitted a number of resumes and haven't heard back, or maybe have gotten a phone interview and just haven't done well and have no idea why they're getting ghosted, why they're not succeeding. And then they come to me and they go, what is it? Right. And then they listen to some videos. I chat with them a bit and they're like, okay, I was going about it all wrong. I want to talk to those who don't know what they don't know and explain to them the benefits of why, before you even waste your time, you need to get educated by someone who's done it. And that doesn't have to be me. I just think that's in life, right? So if you have anything to touch on in that space, what are some of the key things that hey, must do, or looking back, this is what you would definitely tell them?
Yeah, I think it comes down to, I think we hit on, and you were very kind in your thoughts, but I'm a big preparation type person, right? I think if you're in the industry, you're going to need some luck, right? Some luck's going to need to go your way, whether that's getting the foot in the door, whether it's the first deal that you close, whatever that is. Um, but I think preparation and hard work provides luck, right? I'm one of those
Yeah.
people. I think you need to be aware of luck, but if you're banking on luck, right, hope is not a strategy. But are you
Yes.
working hard enough so that way things do fall for you, right? And so I think we talked about preparing when you get those opportunities with the recruiter or the hiring manager. Are you doing your due diligence? So when you get that opportunity, which maybe you may apply to 50 jobs and you might get one interview. So are you squeezing as much juice out of that opportunity as possible, knowing that if you don't move forward in that, you're now going to apply to another 25 or 50 jobs to get that opportunity, right? And hopefully you've done, like you said, some of the people on your team have been so prepared and they're taking your guidance to make that worthwhile. The opposite of that, which is real life, you may get that opportunity and they may decide not to move forward. Have you just asked the question, hey, to the recruiter, maybe to the hiring manager, which you may or may not get that avenue, but you should ask and say, hey, I'm trying, take a step back, self awareness, right? You go back to them and say, hey, look, I get I wasn't the right fit. I'm trying to break in this industry. Can you tell me
Yeah.
what it was about me or my background or whatever it was, what I shared in the interview that you said, hey, this isn't the right person? And don't go in there with a defensive mindset of, I want to change this person's mentality, right? Because they've made their decision. You're going in it with a curiosity and an opportunity to learn. Because if you go through 3 interviews and you're not being successful and you're not asking those questions, maybe you do need someone with an unbiased perspective or someone to share light. Maybe you're showing up to the interview not dressed appropriately. Maybe you're coming off wrong in the interview. Maybe you're so focused on, I want high pay and everything, and that's not what they care about. Maybe you said something, you offended the recruiter because you didn't treat them with respect because you thought it was the hiring manager. I don't know. It could be any of those things,
There's a blind spot there. Yeah.
right? It's clear that there could be a blind spot. One, maybe it's just it wasn't the right fit, or maybe you
Yeah.
were a great candidate and they're going to say, hey, look, you were great, but we just found a rock star, right? That just fit what we needed. Keep doing what you're doing, right? And that's hopefully what you want. But I would ask you to push them to give you some real feedback, because there was a reason they chose that person over you, even though you were great. And so
Yeah.
I would say, same thing with your career. Once you get in, if you are not continuously being a sponge in this industry, I look back at the times when I felt I made it, right? And I was like, oh, I'm a product expert and I can't learn anymore. And those were the times that I think I set myself back a little bit, right? If you are not going into every situation thinking, I can learn something from this person, this situation, this customer, I think you're setting yourself at a disadvantage, because this is constantly evolving, right? You're never going to be 100% knowledgeable, right? There's new techniques, there's new technologies, there's new implants that come out. And so I would just say be a sponge, right? What is it? Ted Lasso, he says, be curious, not judgmental, right? If you're not being curious at every stage, and whether that's seeking feedback, seeking opportunities to learn, I think you're setting yourself at a disadvantage, because you may not be the right candidate or the right person for this role right now.
Yeah.
But if you're
Yep.
not understanding what it is you need to add to your tool belt or whatever that is, when that next opportunity comes up, if you haven't learned from that experience, you're going to run back into the same
Yep.
no thank you, or you're not ready, right? So are you asking those things? And I come across a lot of people, it's are you just asking that to feel good? Like you want someone to tell you you're great, right? And it's almost confirmation bias of, it wasn't me, right? It was, they knew the brother of the sales rep, or they knew the surgeon, and
Yeah.
that's why they got the opportunity. If you're going in with the mindset of, I want to confirm my bias, which is it's not me, I would say you're setting yourself up for not having success. If
Yeah.
you're truly going into it to learn and be better, I think you'll be successful, right? And you're gonna fail in this industry, right? I
Yeah.
mean, back to your point about NSM, it's easy to go watch a deal rip, go to an NSM, see all these people successful, and you're like, well, I can be that. But those people have sat in your shoes. They've been an associate before, they've been a product manager, whatever, and they've gone through the ups and downs to get where they're at. And if you're not finding a way to learn from those people, back to your point about mentorship, um, I think you're missing a huge opportunity to learn from those people that have already sat in your shoes, right? There was a great guy named Brian in Stryker, and he gave this leadership presentation. He said, "Your career is chutes and ladders. Everyone thinks a career is just a rung ladder where you step up and it's, this beautiful trajectory up and to the right." And he was like, look, sometimes you're going to take that step up. You might, in the next opportunity, take a step down to gain some experience, whether that's pay, whether that's title, whatever that
Mhm.
is. But your career is going to go up and down, up and down, up and down. And the hope is that if you go out macro and take a step back, that it looks like a steady trajectory over time.
Right.
But your career is going to be the decisions you make. It's like the S&P 500 goes up, it goes down, but over time, it
Trending.
looks like this great trend, right? And so I think all I would say is learn from your successes, right? If you get too bought into I'm successful and I'm great, and you stop learning, at some point it's going to catch up to you, right? On the flip side of that, if
So
you're
true.
not learning from the experiences where you had failures, I mean, to this day, I remember intimately every single time I screwed up or failed in my brain more than I do the times I succeeded. And generally, it's because the times you failed are better learning lessons than the time you succeed. Because you succeed. Maybe you just got a hot deal. Surgeon was right. Timing was great, and it went through. What did you learn from that?
Yeah.
I learned more from the customers that it took 3 years. Right, different conversations. I found a new way to come back to them, or maybe just timing in the market changed. Right, they didn't
Yeah.
feel the need for robotics. Now they do. So that's what I would just say, and it goes back to that point you mentioned, which is, um, are you prepared for the opportunities when there, and are you taking advantage of every interaction you have to get better?
That's great, dude. I mean but yeah, that's that's well put together. You're absolutely right. Hope is something that you look forward to, not luck. Luck is something that you look back on, right? And every single successful sales rep, any successful person looks back and reflects and goes, "What could I have done better? What could I have done differently? What worked? What didn't work?" Right? And doing the same thing over. If you have failed and you're not looking to make a change, that's the definition of insanity, right? Same result without looking to make a change. So, Jon, this is excellent. This is phenomenal. I'm looking forward to posting this. I think this is going to resonate with a lot of people. As expected, man, I'm super grateful that you jumped on, and I'm super grateful that we remain friends. So, I really do appreciate it. And if there's any last words, the floor is yours.
No, I'll just say, Pedro, one, thanks. I'm appreciative of the opportunity, the fact that you reached out to me and thought I could even provide some value to your audience and so forth. It means a
Of
lot.
course, of
But
course.
I was looking at Sal's interview and I was like, man, this guy is another level and all that stuff. And looking at what he did to get into industries, and I was like, man, I just applied to a role online, so I can't teach on that. But I've learned a lot from it, more of what I haven't done than what I should have done in the industry. And back to the point of, this is a great example of, you never know the impression you're leaving on people. The fact that you reached out to me, right? For your followers, you're
Yeah,
probably reaching out because you thought I could add value, or respect
definitely.
have that. But also I go back to, hey, look, if you're looking in the industry, like I said, there's a lot of people out here that have been in your shoes and waited for someone to give it a shot. Reach out to myself. Happy to be a conduit to people. Not saying I can get you in, but at least if you want to have those dialogues about what you should or shouldn't be doing, happy to be a resource. Because like I said, at some point someone gave me a shot. I'm very thankful for that, and
Yeah.
that can be, the reason someone gets an opportunity. I would love to be that.
That's awesome, man. That's great. Yeah, there's nothing like it giving back to these guys. But 100% your opinions, your mindset, it's definitely valued, and I think it really showed in this. So this is going to be a really good one. I'm looking forward to stitching this and posting it.
Will make me look good, Pedro. That's all I ask. So if you
This will be fun. This is going to be a #1 charter on Spotify. Calling it. Thanks for watching. I hope that gave you some real insight. And if you're serious about getting into medical sales or someone you know, send them to me, medsalesblueprint.com. I have tons of resources, tons of content that help people on their way to get into medical sales fast. Phenomenal industry. You know it. People need help getting in, and that's what I'm here for.